Sit back. We're going to have a wonderful panel this morning. I'm going to invite Sonia to start. Each panelist has 15 minutes. We'll let everybody run one after the other, and then we'll go into conversation and questions. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Thank you very much for coming. I know it's quite a sacrifice for some people to wake up so early, especially if we're still suffering from jet lag. Many of us have come in from far and wide. So my paper this morning is entitled Gully versus Gaza, and you'll notice that there's a question mark there. And throughout the paper, you'll figure out that I'm really questioning whether it is our focus really ought to be on the aspects of competition in our culture versus the cycles that we can observe historically over time in terms of our performance practices. So the title the paper is entitled Gully versus Gaza, Feuds, Factions, and Fueling Fandom in Jamaican Dancehall Performance. On a rock in the Caribbean Sea, far away from any Mediterranean city, caught in the Israeli-Palestinian struggle for freedom, home, and power, Gaza found a new geographical locale. Gaza became the embodiment of one of dancehall's most indelible feuds. In the article Dancehall Dreams, Jennings highlights that urban music dance participation openly embraces its multiple antecedents, conflicts, and futurisms. In the temporary autonomous zones of urban dancehall, there are tensions of various kinds regularly simmering and sometimes boiling over into overt conflict. Feuds or conflicts can be minor or major, lasting short or long periods, and exist at various levels of society. At the highest level, there are conflicts between the state, its apparatuses, and the populace. In various spheres, in and through various sanctions, laws, and more generally, in the post-colonial context, oppressive conditions that create inequalities in income, property, rights, and access to resources. Such inequalities result in real and imagined social, political, and economic divisions where dominant versus subordinate become natural corollaries. Then there is a micro level, seen best in the tensions between individuals, and at the most complex level, feuds can encompass many levels involving the state, institutions, groups, and individuals simultaneously. And according to Jennings, there's an overriding sense of respect for the conviviality of place and occasion, even in the presence of the kinds of antagonisms which, in other contexts, even in the same city and time, seem irreconcilable. Recent examples of feuding in the Jamaican society include outcry about the ban imposed by the Broadcasting Commission on daggering and related content, which was triggered by a series of events that profiled social decay and the role of images, music, and lyrics, which are aired outside the corpus and sphere of the dance hall on cable and free-to-air channels. A history of intervention by the Broadcasting Commission includes the development of the Children Code for Programming, which emerged from a process of consultation generated by mounting concern about the vulnerability of youths whose exposure to highly explicit content is largely uncensored. Popularly rendered as clashes in the Jamaican dancehall space, feuds have been a feature of Jamaican popular culture, and in the more contemporary period has been theorized by scholars such as Cooper in her 1993 Slackness Hiding from Culture and her 2004 Sound Clash, for example. Feuds have been both at the real and symbolic levels in such performance practices as stick fighting, competition among set girls, or performers of Brockin's Party, among others. Contemporary feuds include the public versus the Broadcasting Commission, where the Commission was bitterly accused of having double standards in the process to regulate vulgar content in the lyrics of dancehall songs played in the media, while overlooking the broadcasting of distasteful dancing during Carnival. The Broadcasting Commission was vilified in the process of issuing their directives, as many members of the public opposed the decision and berated those in support of it, while some supported the decision to ban the airplay of vulgar lyrics. Then there is the Gully versus Gaza feud. Over 800,000 Google hits ranging from images such as advertisements for events to rhythms, songs, or mixes, newspaper articles, polls, and blog entries have stamped the Gully versus Gaza saga indelibly on the World Wide Web since late 2008. Arguably, it became an industry with a seemingly incessant life of its own and a momentum that was unfathomable, even much beyond the imagination of its progenitors. When Sting, the University of Clashes, advertised the highlight of its 2008 lineup as a clash between Mavado and Vybz Kartel, fans could not wait to finally figure out if the Barber Boy could be any match for Kartel in a live show. So far-reaching was the conflict that it transcended the dancehall sphere to engulf schoolrooms that were divided down the middle. The home, government officials, media commentators, and so on were all involved. Further, there was a controversial move by the Jamaican Prime Minister to invite the warring parties to meet at Jamaica House in a bid to settle differences and provide a united front to a tense fan base which was digging itself deeper and deeper into violent conflicts. Perhaps one critical highlight was the production and sale of Buttons, featuring Kartel carrying a machine gun. The Media Association of Jamaica also got involved and leveled stinging criticism against the Bruce Golding administration for holding a high-profile meeting at Jamaica House with feuding dancehall artists Adidja Palmer and David Brooks. While some saw it as a paradigm shift, there was acknowledgement of the hypocrisy in the way government used dancehall as a scapegoat while avoiding serious and persistent problems, as well as the way Golding inadvertently legitimized the very thing which was seen to be a growing problem by virtue of the attention paid to it. After all, how could that which is to be denigrated based on its effects on social decay be given attention by government officials who are not giving sustained energy to the fortification and rationalization of the Jamaican music industry? But where did this begin? How did the term Gaza become synonymous with dancehall lyricist and performer Vybz Kartel and his empire? When and why did Vybz Kartel decide to rename his Borderlands community Gaza? And I know Annie's going to talk a little bit about that. Gaza is now the home of Kartel's Portmore Empire, a musical fraternity with Kartel at the organization's center. The term Gaza, in its new incarnation, retains the connotations of violence and unrest and has to be read as a medium through which to communicate messages about real and imagined musical power struggles and also violence. Counterposed to this Portmore Empire and its Gaza locale in Kingston's cassava piece Gully, which Kartel's opponent Mavado declares as his territory. In this paper, I do not seek to historicize the Gully Gaza episode. Neither do I intend to present a logical or objective flow of events and their impact on the sociodrama of the Jamaican popular sphere. Rather, I use the Gully Gaza episode to insert some missing texts in the analysis of Jamaican popular culture using theoretical frames around popular movements and fandom. Importantly, this paper is mindful of the danger in taking an ahistorical view of dancehall performance practice. Prince Buster and Derek Morgan, I-Roy and U-Roy, Bounty Killer and Beanie Man, Stone Love and Kilimanjaro, and more recently Vybz Kartel and Mavado have all had their go at musical rivalry. With a history of political tribalism, one would not have to look far to find an example of conflicts on a day-to-day basis, and so too in the popular realm, conflicts abound. But what makes this Vybz Kartel Mavado saga different? Was this a typical feud? It was of a different time, and I am proposing new lens through which to view it. I'm arguing that in the case of the Gully Gaza feud, there is evidence of its manifestation at different levels, including simultaneous inscription onto, among others, location, constituents, institutions, rituals, performance modes, and history. This paper acknowledges the centrality of taking a historical view in order to see patterns and strategies beyond musical lenses, beyond competition, and ultimately beyond isolated events. I wish to focus now on the theorization of fandom as a product of the Gully Gaza feud, or a manifestation within the Gully Gaza feud. As highly influential performers, Kartel and Mavado have managed to command substantial fan bases, aided and abetted by the capacity of new media to transmit and multiply the power of their influence in ways that instantly impact youth subculture. The rivalry, which manifested in counteraction tunes, scathing dialogues, insults, and parody, served to fuel a thirst on the part of fans to witness and sometimes take ownership for sustaining the conflict. The power of their appeal fits squarely into categories such as a star, a term used synonymously with the term celebrity. These categories are somewhat problematic for especially public intellectuals who estimate the contemporary celebrity syndrome to be a symptom of a worrying cultural shift towards a culture that privileges the momentary, the visual, and the sensational over the enduring, the written, and the rational. Conversely, there are those who see celebrities as extraordinary people exposed by industry officials, not necessarily having their own merit, necessarily having their own talent, but those who are promoted and sustained by capital injections. And of course, in another setting, I have theorized about new ways in which to conceptualize the production of celebrity in Jamaican culture, specifically within dancehalls. I won't go into that much about that here. In the ensuing Gully Gaza conflict, it was evident that the lives of the main actors were larger than life and of tremendous importance to fans. Beyond the construction of badges and the formation of Gully Gaza factions as a result of intense feuding, there's also the dimension of their relationships, marriages, travel itinerary, etc., etc. I want to use the example of Cartel's birthday bash, which was held in December 2009 in the building, where bystanders to the night's proceedings were witness to a different sort of celebrity, and most importantly, a different sort of fan. It is such events and the manifestations around the activities of fans that insist on the analysis of fandom. For the purpose of my analysis, fandom is a term used to refer to a subculture composed of fans characterized by a feeling of sympathy and camaraderie with others who share a common interest. Fans typically are interested in even minor details of the object of their fandom and spend a significant portion of their time and energy involved in with their interests, often as part of a social network or movement, those with only a casual interest. So I could go on and on about fandom. Just to highlight that theories of fandom include theorizing about romantic attachment, identification, and even fantasy. And I'm proposing that the events around Vybz Kartel's birthday bash suggest some very interesting manifestations about the evolution of this phenomenon of fandom in the Jamaican context. Let me just go on to, so let me return to Cartel's birthday bash, where fans performed acts of worship that have previously been rare on the Jamaican popular cultural scape. I was personally surprised to hear that Cartel fans were fainting as he arrived and alighted from his car in a sort of ultimate act of submission, falling supposedly involuntarily at his feet. A sort of act, therefore, of worship. Who are these fans? Many are female who see opportunities to gain status from associating with stars, and I've written elsewhere and in my forthcoming book about dancehall as a status-granting institution, which is tapped by persons of all classes, but mostly of the lower classes, who stand to gain through various acts, levels of visibility and access that would previously not be available to them. This status is not only gained by artists, but those who can associate with them, in this case, and in some cases, groupies. And I think you all might know who groupies are, women who follow artists around, oftentimes offering sexual favors. All the stars that we know, from the Beatles, the Bob Marleys, etc., they have been groupies. So women, based on the conceptualization of fandom, the attraction of power, the benefits, whether emotional or financial, are all a part of the ways in which this fantasy around associating with an artist is constructed. So I postulate that this is beyond the status shared by such figures in the dancehall world as Duke Reid and Sir Coxsone Dodd, who were escorted by motorcades at the airport, from the airport on their arrival home after sojourning for exclusive records. I want to suggest that the current manifestations of fandom in the Jamaican landscape have been heavily influenced by images and performances circulating in the World Wide Web of digital content available to youth globally. It is not that we have never had celebrities, therefore. Rather, the manifestations around conflicts and responses to fans have increased in their impact and intensity precisely because of the evolution in modes and expressions of fandom and related practices. There are cycles of performance that therefore need to be analyzed, and I'll close there. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. My paper is called Eyeless in Gaza and Gully, Midep on the Borderline. And it's based on my blog, Active Voice, a post that I did in September last year when the media was, when the Gaza Gully feud was at its height. The two words inscribed in locations all over Kingston and Jamaica signify internecine zones of conflict competing for supremacy in the dancehall universe here. For those who don't know, Gaza equals cartel and Gully equals Mavado. Mavado, popularly known as Gully Guard, comes from Gully Side and Cassava Piece, an impoverished community in the foothills of Kingston. Cartel comes from a neighborhood in Portmore that was once known as Borderline. And thereby hangs a tale, a story that you wouldn't find in the normal media here, which specializes in skimming the surface and shallow moralizing. The Jamaican media generously accommodates both sinners and sermonizers, protecting the former by voluntarily gagging themselves, and the latter by giving them as many column inches as their sermons demand. In the US, it is citizens who usually plead the Fifth and have the right to remain silent, both stemming from the Fifth Amendment of their Constitution. In Jamaica, the media seems to have arrogated such rights to themselves. They provide a minimum of in-depth coverage of events, apparently on the grounds that the information given could be used as evidence against them. So, like me, you may not have known the etymology of the term Gaza in the Jamaican context. Talk about the media being eyeless in Gaza, or why Borderline came to be so renamed. It's a fascinating story which is intimately connected, as a batty is to a bench, you might say, with this culture's notorious attitude towards male homosexuals, or batty men as they are called here. It all has to do with an actor known as Shabada, the star of a super successful series of plays put on by Stages Productions. This company produces what is known in local parlance as roots plays, a kind of farcical, over-the-top production with picaresque characters performing or acting out the issues of the day. Sex is a big part of it, and subtlety is not. But Stages Productions, whose slogan is, quote, "Comedy is serious business," always plays to full houses. Stages Production has also foregrounded the explicit exploration of alternative sexualities, and Shabada himself, whose stage persona is as camp as they come, and I'll just scroll down to give you a look at what he looks like. That's him. I won't get time to play this video clip. I wish I could, but you can go to my blog later and play it and see. But that's Shabada. Shabada himself, whose stage persona is camp as they come and twice as provocative, sports a bleached face and gayish attributes that complicate the argument that Jamaica is unremittingly hostile to gays. In fact, well, let me skip. The induction of the name Gaza into the Jamaican firmament came about because in the very first insanely popular Stages production, Bashman Granny, there's a scene where a policeman confronts the sinuous Shabada asking, "You a man or you a woman?" "Midep on the borderline," declares Shabada unabashedly, emphasizing his retort with an exaggerated wag of his hips. The phrase became so popular in the context of discussions about sexuality that Vibes Cartel decided that the name of his community, Borderline, had been irrevocably contaminated by association. He therefore adopted the name of the most violent place he could think of at the time, Gaza in Palestine. It's important to note that the Gaza-Gully rivalry had been going on for some time before the media really started to focus on it. What propelled them to suddenly sit up and take notice was when Usain Bolt, the much celebrated runner, Jamaican runner, made comments suggesting that he was a Gaza supporter. There was even a cartoon about it in one of the newspapers. So this was followed then by an attack on 2 Canadian tourists who happened to play a song by one of the DJs in the other DJ's quote-unquote territory. Suddenly there was a feeding frenzy, and the airwaves and print media were full of condemnatory and critical coverage of the dancehall feud. In a widely publicized interview between Cliff Hughes, a prominent local journalist, and Vybz Kartel on TVJ's Impact, which aired on November 12, 2009, when asked about the conflict, Kartel claimed that Gaza Gully was basically superimposed on schisms that exist, and society shouldn't expect Movado and him to bear the burden for what society had created, because the decay in society wasn't created by them. They were merely mirrors. And then Cliff Hughes says, skip that part. So Vybz Kartel goes on to say, the right people to ask that question are the politicians, people who have access to money, to know-how, the resources, people who can help the garrisons. And when asked why the violence in his music, he said, because it sells, basically. Since the start of this year, I've done 4 gangster songs. They get ratings. Anything the people want, the people will get. At the root of the violence are the socio-economic conditions, gun culture cultivated by a politician. These are just brief sound bites from that interview. Cliff Hughes says, take off the artist hat and put on the citizen hat. What would you say to the politicians? Vybz says, I have nothing to say to the politicians. As artists, we stay far from politicians. Gaza me say. Cliff Hughes says, what Gaza me say mean? He says, Vybz Kartel says, Gaza means fight for what you believe in against all odds, against all adversity. How had he arrived at the name Gaza? He says, when I left the alliance, and Vybz Kartel has this endearing practice of referring to himself in the third person, you know? So he doesn't say, when he's talking about Vybz Kartel, it's as if Vybz Kartel is another person. So he says, when I left the alliance, Vybz Kartel came under so much pressure, I said to Black Rhino and others, we need to form a group, but we need a perfect name. The first war was just happening in Gaza. Israel was bombarding them, but the people were fighting back regardless. And Kartel said to Lang, we're going to use that name because it means to me, them people, they're serious and them not back down. And then he makes a link to the pressure he came under when he left the alliance, when his career was threatened. So that was the perfect name for him at the time, he said. So Cliff Hughes then says, but you and a singer called Escobar and another friend decided to join forces, and they got the name from a movie about Escobar and his infamous cartel. How come this attraction for notorious, infamous people, etc.? Vybz Kartel, no, the idea of adopting the name cartel predated that because, quote, a cartel is a group of people coming together to limit prices and control competition, and that's what Vybz Kartel wanted at the time. We distribute music, legal narcotics. End of quote. I carried segments of the interview on my blog, Active Voice, and this blog post generated quite a heated debate, as you can imagine. One of the most interesting responses was from an anonymous friend who said, Hail Annie Paul, slide 1, observe, rivalry generates profit whether in sports or music, or any form of entertainment for that matter. Ever seen WWE, which is World Wrestling Entertainment? These guys profitably create stage rivalry between groups and extreme personalities. An audience likes to pick a side, team, or star to identify with and cheer for. That's how we immerse ourselves and are entertained, because for a brief moment we escape reality. The sad thing is dancehall promoters, producers have unfortunately not yet learned the marketing techniques of WWE. Next slide. I have a different view on the fish Batman argument. People embracing on stage Sheba type or Shushu, the original gender bender drag queen personalities. This on stage embrace is no real indication of our gay tolerance. The true indication is the number of quote unquote big men that are reportedly homosexual but embraced at community level by supporters of political parties and dancehall groups and affiliates. In fact, the only gay any Jamaican has beaten in recent times is Tyson Gay. While I don't support the gay lifestyle, nor do I think it best, like many other Jamaicans, have never engaged in anti-gay behavior. being magnified in the media or by gay rights activists. Last slide. Cartel didn't want persons to think of his community as an quote-unquote aquarium because he himself has been accused of being a fish because of his association with Patrick Roberts and Betweenie Man. Additionally, the allegations against Cartel mount as his good friend is reported to have Cartel's face and name tattooed on his arm. It's also believed that Cartel has used skin lightening cream in bleach. Cartel had no choice but to go the Gaza route in order to project masculinity. How better than to associate yourself and community with violence? Gaza. Last slide. The present stupidity in dancehall almost makes me miss the days of Shaba versus Ninja and Supercat versus everybody. And this statement is a reference to the tradition of clashing that is, Gaza and Gully is just the contemporary manifestation of. Now returning for a moment to Stage's production and the play Bashman Granny, the reason I think that the Shabada character represents a step forward is because it means there's no longer such a denial of the existence of homosexuals in our midst. Not only that, Shabada is not portrayed as a weird, shunnable, problematic character. He's actually the star of the show. Not easy to do if he was portrayed as a ridiculous, unnatural, semi-criminal who is a dire threat to society, the standard manner in which batty men are represented in the dance hall. I really don't see him as the butt of vicious humor either. In fact, much of the time, he's at the center of the comedy, poking fun at others. I think his character is far more complicated than one would expect from the intensely hostile, homophobic space that Jamaica often is or seems to be. Out of curiosity, I interviewed Bunny Allen, the producer and moving force behind Stage's productions. He had seen Shabada play a gay character in Comedy Buzz, a stand-up comedy competition. Shabada didn't win it, but he was the most popular stand-up in that competition. So Alan decided to approach him to act in his series of plays that he was about to start, and the rest is history. But Alan, according to Alan, right now I wouldn't say Shabada is the most popular actor in Jamaica. I would say he's the most popular entertainer in Jamaica, more popular than either Cartel or Movado. As Alan said to a Star reporter, no artist can do that. They cannot pull the audience that Shabada is able to pull. No Richie Stevens, no Beres Hammond, none of them can pull the audience. If you take up Bounty, Cartel, Movado, and put them in a venue on the same night as Shabada, that event would be empty. There's another quote saying something to the same effect, but in the interest of time. Well, saying the other day in England, Movado played to 300 people in the Brixton Academy. A few days later, Shabada put 2,300 into the venue, and then they had to turn back 1,000, and it's the same promoters them who put on both shows, Bunny explained. This is astounding because the characters Keith Shabada Ramsey plays are all stereotypically effeminate. He plays an over-the-top gay persona to such success and acclaim that at this point it's impossible for him to play anything else. The producer is exploiting the entertainment value and not necessarily trying to address Jamaican prejudice against gays. But Alan says the people who hit out against Shabada is the people from the inner city, and they're the same guys with the tight pants, the earrings, the bleach, and all of that. Even the DJs will go around and brand Shabada as gay, because to be branded as gay, we all know how we in Jamaica feel about gay men. I asked if it wasn't a negative thing to have, for the business, having a gay character at the center of the play. He said, in the beginning, it was real pressure. Bashman Granny was a problem. People would run the team who was sent out to do local promotion, saying they didn't want any gay men show around here and all that. Stage's production itself was branded as gay because of Shabada. Alan thinks that some of the DJs who protest the loudest are probably themselves involved, as he put it, and the DJs help and contribute to Shabada's success, he declared. Most of them have done song and keep on calling his name in a negative light, but the more they call his name, the more the public wants to see him. And he says that his plays also have a gay clientele regularly. He says also when the same entertainers who fireban Shabada see him overseas when he tours, they talk to him, laugh with him, and don't have a problem at all. Sound system selectors always come to a new Shabada play just to hear the new talk that Shabada comes with. Most of his phrases, the new talk, are even used in Parliament he claimed. So I exclaimed at that, and he said, yeah, man, dash it upon me without warning, which is something that Portia famously said. It's straight Shabada slang. That was something Shabada said in a play. So to wind up, I'm suggesting that the clash that I've described between DJ culture and that of gender bender Shabada suggests that popular attitudes towards homosexuals may be slowly changing. Clearly, this is a baby step and a lot more needs to be done. But the success of Sage's production suggests that theater, the kind of theater that reaches the people, may be a good place to campaign for the normalization and acceptance of behavior that is now considered beyond the pale. For it's not really homosexuality that seems to be proscribed in Jamaica. The national grief and mourning for Professor Rex Nettleford, a man widely believed to be gay, is proof of this. It's the freedom of those gay men who want to be out and about, who want to be overt about their effeminacy that is at stake. Thank you.
Well, I'm talking about clashing in very amoral terms. You know, I'm not particularly concerned with the moral values of clashes or whether it signifies the rent in our social fabric. The fact of the matter is, as Annie's one quote from Annie's blog had shown, the clash is business. It's a business move, and it is one that has always been in dancehall and in hip hop, and that is what I intend to examine. You know, a clash is defined in the dictionary as to make a loud, harsh noise, to conflict and collide. In dancehall, it combines all these elements to be lyrical warfare. It has launched careers such as Beanie Man, Vibes Cartel, and Bounty Killer himself, and sustained careers that have otherwise died for want of new material. And Ninja Man. I mean, Ninja Man revives everything to clash. You know what I mean? We can't tell the last time we've heard a new Ninja Man song, or if we'll ever hear a new Ninja Man song, but he can clash. And so every year the career and the machinery goes into play pre-Boxing Day to culminate at Sting. So Gaza and Gully was essentially lyrical warfare. And I postulate that one of the reasons it got to the level it did was because there was no clash, there was no resolution of that warfare, and so it continued and continued to boiling point. But the fact that they're blamed for violence in our society would be put to rest by the recently released Donna Hope Marquis study, and I'm not just saying her name because she's the convener of the conference and I want to come back next year. But that shows that while the songs are themselves violent, they don't necessarily result in violent action. Music is an expression of our heritage, and the fact that the clash exists in hip hop culture shows that there seems to imply that there are studies that show that there are some African retentions in the action of a clash, whether it's within our personal relations, but also particularly in lyrical warfare. But as I said, music is business, and I think that's the point of view I'm coming from because of my particular position as co-CEO of Ends of the Earth. There have been huge changes in the international music market. So I've established that the clash and its history within the Jamaican context. But also let's look at the music market that we're talking about. Once the international music market used to be about records, who can sell the most records, the grand marketing campaign. I remember my pilgrimages in college to the used record store to attempt to be able to afford records, so I had to get them used, etc. But no, this is not what the international music market looks like. No, it's dominated by Napster, LimeWire, and iTunes. What these guys have in common is that this is digital download. So no longer is a focus on the grand album, but what is your next song looking like? What is the next tune? As that tune in common parlance, as it drops, will it be a hit? You no longer are able to have one strong or two strong songs on an album and then fill it with essential space fillers. Now every tune is looked upon with great focus, and hence, starting to look like the Jamaican environment. We saw the record companies realize how much that hurt their bottom line, because contracts were usually done based on the amount of record units that were sold. So things like touring, merchandising, that was all artist money by and large. That led to a number of court cases against college students and the like, particularly with regard to Napster. And then the record companies or other companies realized that instead of fighting it, let's get on the bandwagon. So that resulted in iTunes. Let us sell these digital downloads instead of fighting them. Sell the highest quality possible and charge people the minimum amount we can, and just start making money that way. Albums still sell, but the orientation in contracts has changed. We now have what is called a 360-degree contract, which is where the companies take portions of all the income. You talk merchandising, touring, records, to deal with that issue. Now, why is that important for us? Jamaican music, while we've created superstars, and we know Bob Marley, and then in the latter years, Shaggy and Sean Paul, we have not had a lot of artists that move a lot of record units, because our culture and in essence the culture of a diaspora has not been a record buying culture. But yet this new orientation actually has started to look more like Jamaica. It's very single focused. Anyone who's ever bought a 45 understands why you buy the 45 versus the album. It has to do with a lot of samplers. People need to perform and give you something to make you follow them. It's no longer, oh, this is the latest big star coming out of VP Records, etc., and so we will automatically give support to them. That has never been the Jamaican or the Caribbean way to support an artist. An artist has always had to deliver a performance. And in the Jamaican dancehall segment, it usually has had to win a clash. There has been also, because of the prevalence of digital media and electronic media to promote yourselves, like MySpace was the first one. Then you had Facebook, etc. Self-marketing has become huge on the international music sphere, and so you've seen artists actually choosing to not have traditional contracts with record companies, but instead moving with the digital media, like Madonna, like 9 Inch Nails, etc. And that again has started to look a lot like what happens in the dancehall. A clash is essentially building up momentum and self-marketing to a resolution. And hopefully if you win that, then you might have a career. Jamaica was already there. And so how has it looked? How has it looked on the Jamaican environment? My BlackBerry is giving problems, sorry. So the glut in the market in Jamaica was one of the reasons for the focus on that lyrical content and that stage performance, because in Jamaica, talent is created every day. I cannot tell you how many artists we have coming to ends of the earth saying, well, I want you to promote us, etc. And they sound great, but you look and you're like, well, the content is not there. The stage performance, there are other elements of it in terms of the marketing of them. That means that in the environment, it will be hard to market them unless we find an artist to put them up against and generate the kind of buzz and fever. But the issue in the Jamaican environment has always been, is it a legitimate way to bust? Is the clash a sign of our moral decay, or is it just another way of marketing? Sting has been built on this marketing. I mean, this year the organizer had to create a clash, and that clash was L.A. Lewis versus Goofy. So you're putting a non-artist against a dead artist, and to promote this show, and it worked. The non-artist being L.A. Lewis, who is widely known as a graffiti artist. And so his one claim to fame was, in the musical arena, was a scroll on the wall that declared him the biggest DJ in Jamaica. Or maybe if you look at his website, the website declares him a reggae superstar. But up until the clash, he actually had no songs. Goofy had previously had a career, but had not been heard from in about 2 years. And so you would think this wouldn't work. But you had at 9:30 a.m. on December 27th, when the show was still continuing after Mavado, Bounty Killer, and Vibes Cartel had already performed, people stood in Jam World, the venue of Sting, waiting for the L.A. Lewis Goofy clash. And that alone shows you the marketing mechanism that is a clash. Nevertheless, I should describe the digital run-up to it. It wasn't just the fever in the streets and the talk. You had the YouTube downloads, you had the blogging, you had the song downloads. In fact, if you compare it with album sales, Sean Paul's Imperial Blaze, which is his latest offering, up until the end of November 2009, had only moved about 51,000 units in the States. This is our platinum artist, Sean Paul. One Sting diss song leading up to Sting had, within 1 month, had 176 views alone. So that alone tells you the kind of traffic towards it. I actually ran an experiment because the L.A. Lewis Goofy clash did not happen. And so a whole show, showing the power of marketing, a whole show was created in St. Thomas, of all places, to decide this clash, and it was called The Settlement. And so you had, again, these two artists headlining it. And I went to the clash, took the footage, and then put it up on a completely new YouTube channel. Now, those who are familiar with YouTube know that your rank on it is based on how many views you've had, the comments, etc. So a completely new channel is being almost dead in the water. And then the only things I put on it were the settlement footage and a completely new name, etc. Within 3 days of putting it up, I had over 3,000 views. Normally, yes, 176 if I had been on an established channel, but the fact is people actually were searching to find that. I can't even imagine how many pages I had to scroll through. And 3,000 views in 1 day, in 3 days. Also, it revived 2 careers. It revived the vaunted clash, but also this settlement show had 3 clashes back to back. And so the L.A. Lewis Goofy clash ended up not being the clash. Actually, the clash between one of the artists that, Ends of the Earth back. So we're getting first-hand information. Who was a non-artist stepping into the show, clashed with Merciless. And then his career revived. We had 4 producer bookings by the time we left through the gate. This is just from the clash, and already had a fan base, so we had to get online and create fan clubs, etc. And I will show you what it is like to have a lyrical death. I think it's very.
I heard that something man that makes sex of this. I heard that something that makes sex of this.
Background noise of the audience. This is the established DJ. He's known as the Warhead. And his whole career was based on a clash. And then for the left of him is the new apologies for the word. That the death that is spoken about in the dancehall isn't meant to be violent, but it's actually meant to be a lyrical death. And as you can see, that was death of the highest order. But what the point of the presentation, though, is to show that after that show, I mean, the result has been we're already booked on tours throughout the Caribbean. We already have the shows that are coming up that we have to be booked on. And the reality is that this is one way that the Jamaican musical industry can take back control of their industry from the major record companies and promote ourselves in this new digital marketplace whereby currency is really the new, attention is really the new currency. This is the way to get endorsements. This is the way to be seen. So this all the conflict about, is it moral, etc. We have to realize that clash is actually a means of economic empowerment. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Well, 3 outstanding presentations there, so I will try to follow suit. My presentation is entitled Prince Buster versus Derek Morgan, the original sound clash. And this was the original sound clash so far as the Jamaican music industry is concerned. And let me also say that this wasn't a marketing gimmick. This was personal and it was political. Now, the story begins essentially when Leslie Kong, who was the first Chinese Jamaican to come into the recording business, recruited Derek Morgan into his musical camp, one of the giants of ska, as I'm sure all of you know. Together with his 2 brothers, Leslie Kong owned Beverly's. Beverly's was a combined ice cream parlor, cosmetics boutique, and record shop. Now, the first musical session that Leslie Kong had actually was with not only with Derek Morgan, but also with Jimmy Cliff and Monty Morris, who were all big recording artists, ska artists at the time in early '62. And this was really the beginning of the Beverly's label. Now, ska, which was recorded right from the beginning, the ska that he recorded, Leslie Kong recorded, in that session didn't result in any hit records. But in the second session, there was some results with a track called Hurricane Hattie from Jimmy Cliff. But notably, the real hit that Leslie Kong scored was with Derek Morgan's big tune, Forward March, which is a massive hit in '62 and is the unofficial anthem for independence when Jamaica became independent in '62. The established producers at the time, people like Coxsone and Duke Reid and so forth, were not so pleased about the success of Leslie Kong. They weren't so accommodating about his elevated success. In fact, the argument could be made that they deeply resented the idea of a Chinese Jamaican moving into what had been exclusively and importantly black arena. And so, in a sense, there was, in fact, a racial dimension in the whole dynamic of Leslie Kong. Now, interesting enough, Prince Buster, who was not only a sound system operator, but also a producer himself, also resented the success that Leslie Kong had with Derek Morgan's track, Forward March. And I should also emphasize, many people know Prince Buster as an artist. I mean, he vied with Prince Derek Morgan for the title King of Ska, but he was also a producer, which is very important, as well as a sound system operator. So Prince Buster thought that this was a slap in the face for Derek Morgan to go to Beverly record label and record Forward March, especially as he himself had produced so many of Derek Morgan's hit tunes, and that they had a fairly close working relationship. Prince Buster made his feelings very public when his Voice of the People sound system started blasting a song that he produced to convey his feelings called Blackhead Chinaman, a single which was full of unambiguous chastisement. Part of the song goes like this: "You done stole my belongings and you give them to your Chinaman. Are you a Chinaman or are you a black man? I don't need no eyeglass to see that your skin is black." Now, Prince Buster, he never minced his words. This song, though, kicked off a war of words. It was this song that really started the dancehall clash, in which Morgan and King responded to each other with tune after tune, both of them feeling obliged to answer. So when Prince Buster actually releases Blackhead Chinaman, Derek Morgan responds with Blazing Fire, which interestingly enough, he starts the track by speaking in Chinese. And there's a little interlude at the beginning, and he speaks in Chinese, and translated it says, "Shut up, you fool." So after Derek Morgan releases Blazing Fire, Prince Buster decides to respond with a tune called Praise Without Raise, and Watch It, Blackhead. Derek Morgan, refusing to lie down and take this thing lightly, decides to release a track called Still Insist, No Raise, No Praise. Now I want to give a little context about this notion of no raise, no praise, and praise without raise, because the argument is that, or there was a sentiment that the non-black record producers, such as Chris Blackwell and Leslie Kong, were essentially more accommodating in terms of paying their artists. This was a sentiment that certainly Jimmy Cliff felt was noteworthy. But we should really look very carefully at this dynamic, and arguably it was a dynamic that came about from the legacy of colonialism and slavery. Basically, we could argue that the Chris Blackwell or Leslie Kong appear to play straight, or straighter than black producers in their direct dealings with the artists, because of the fact that black producers, by and large, tended to show less respect to themselves, or tended to express more disdain for each other, and by contrast, more respect for white people in the industry because of the indictment of slavery and colonialism. An argument is made that it is easier to show disdain and disrespect amongst each other than across the racial lines. And this was a result of, the colonial legacy. But this blatant lack of self-respect was something that Prince Buster felt very strongly about, and he sought to change the whole dimension of this, largely because Prince Buster had joined the Nation of Islam in 1961. The Nation of Islam, I'm sure most of you know, is a movement that started in 1930, and a movement that advocates black nationalism and black racial solidarity. So Prince Buster, who was a member of the Nation of Islam from 1961, felt very strongly about black economic nationalism. And one of the problems he had with Derek Morgan was that he felt that by enriching or empowering Leslie Kong, that he was essentially taking money out of the black recording fraternity into the non-black recording fraternity. So that was one issue that he felt very strongly about. So arguably his motives in the clash were political, more political arguably than personal. The key importance for him, as I said, in adopting black nationalism was black advancement through economic nationalism. So although he intended to maintain the cultural thrust of the developing musical genre of ska, he also saw the business side of this unique form of cultural expression as a means to generate wealth for black people who lived in the ghetto communities, for black people who lived in the inner city communities, And every shilling, he believed, that was generated by record sales should go to black people. And this was something he felt very strongly about. So then when Derek Morgan goes to record with Leslie Kong, and you have to realize that they had a working relationship before he went to record with Leslie Kong, he took this very, very seriously. And arguably, as I said, on an ideological level, not so much on a personal level. Even Prince Buster himself made the argument that there was a very terrible or very distressing trend of black artists becoming subordinate to producers and label bosses of other races, and he sought to correct this. So it should be remembered, and I want people to bear this in mind, and the key point I want to bear to bring forth is that his stinging musical rebukes to Derek Morgan's musical offerings with titles that included 30 pieces of silver, basically emphasizing betrayal and treason, disloyalty, were done so in an effort to counsel Derek Morgan rather than simply to chastise him, to counsel him into coming back into the fold, so to speak, with black producers, and not, as in his mind, to cross the enemy lines or cross racial lines. So essentially, this dancehall clash, though, that ensued is very interesting because you had the two kings of ska, Derek Morgan and Prince Buster, and these were giants in the music at the time. Let me just say that Derek Morgan, in particular, in 1962, had 7 #1 hits in the Jamaican top 10. 7 #1 hits simultaneously has never ever been achieved before in Jamaican history. So this is to show you how the popularity, the relative popularity. And Prince Buster had a massive following. And so intense was the following that they had, that this musical feud that went between them, although there wasn't any real animosity, although I would argue that to date that they are actually friends, still friends. Actually, I was hoping that Derek Morgan would have graced the stage. He's supposed to be here in somewhere on the campus. But anyway, although there was no animosity between them as such, there was a serious feud that ensued between their camps, between the fans. And such was so violent and so intense was this musical feud that violence spilled out in the streets. And it had a very interesting situation, a situation quite similar to the Gaza Gully situation of last year. And in fact, the violence was so prevalent and prolific between the different camps, between the Derek Morgan fans and the Prince Buster fans, that the government had to intervene and organize a photo shoot between both artists. And this is how they resolved the situation. And I basically saw a very ironic and profound, similarity to the current situation with Vibes Cartel and Mavado, who basically the government intervened. They had a photo shoot, so to speak, and then this was a way to make peace amongst the fans and quell the violence. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks a lot.
Gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much for some very stimulating, thought-provoking presentations. Very, very quickly, I almost want to say, Sonia and Michael, that the more things change, the more they remain the same. It was fascinating to hear the similarities between the 60s and the 2000s, to hear too about the whole question of ideological polarizations within our Jamaican context and how they're playing themselves out now slightly differently. The political nature of the original clash, as opposed perhaps, Kim, to a marketing dimension of a way of bossing an artist that will help to put them out there on the stage, and that's a marketing tool that you're arguing for that's going to actually help us as Jamaicans to take back our industry, which seems to have sort of gotten out of our hands in a certain way. And he liked the way you tried to do the contrast with the stage show and the popular DJ, and to shock us into recognizing that Shabada is quite possibly more popular than Cartel. I think many of us here probably found that to be something very new for us to deal with. And to recognize that what you're pointing out is that there's a space that the stage show has carved out that is possibly moving us forward as Jamaicans, maybe by incremental steps perhaps, but certainly in a way that will assist us to reframe how we view sexual orientation, particularly the homosexual male and his space in Jamaican society. So there's a lot that we can sort of dig into there. Certainly, again, going back to Sonia and Sonia's earlier presentation and the recognition that we have moved our sense of clash and conflict into a new space that bears some drilling down, that we need to go a little bit deeper in understanding what's going on when we talk about clashes and how they've certainly taken on a new orientation in our current moment. So I know the audience has a lot that they want to, sort of ask, questions that they want to put forward. I think we need to use the mic in order to get people to have their comments recorded. And I just wanted to throw this in, because as I was listening, most of the DJs that we talked about that were involved in clashing or in the various conflicts and so on tend to be the male DJs. But I wondered what's going on with the fact that we have a tradition in Jamaica about tracing, that seems to be a very feminine activity. And how is it that tracing, because I can see lots of, comparisons between the acts of tracing and the clashing and the killing that happened lyrically, how is that reframed for a male-dominated artistic space, So I don't know, maybe Sonia, you could jump on that before we move over to our audience.
Very interesting insight there, Anna. I haven't done too much work on orality, so to speak, but I'll just make the comment I immediately thought about, which is that, yes, I think at the heart of clashing and tracing is this idea of competition. And I think that's pretty much a part of human existence. And I think it is exaggerated in the context that we find ourselves in a post-colonial context, where the competition takes on the entire context of gaining status, gaining identity, making one's place in the world and setting that place, oftentimes in circumstances where one is denied a place. So I would actually analyze that in the context of the historical narratives that are available to us, that we actually live every day. Somebody might have another kind of comment about that.
Right. It's for Kim. Right. My question is simple. Can local artists actually utilize iTunes to actually sell records? And I'll give you the context. The context is this. Vybz Kartel released his album last year, and he sold 500 copies. That's one. And also in the context that iTunes, which is the dominant online store, when you check the charts, I checked the charts this morning in the 22 listed countries. And as usual, you only see catalog albums on it. And secondly, Bob Marley, this is the chart right here. Bob Marley's Legend is on about 19 of the 22 listed charts, right? At number one. So really and truly, can local artists really make any headway in terms of selling online?
The completed paper, it actually addresses that issue. No, right? But in the future, I believe yes. One, because while controversy sells, and so for the international bus, so to speak, or the gaining international prominence, the clash won't result in that, but it paves the way for you to have a career that will have that. Controversy sells, but it doesn't last. And so you can look at a number of controversial artists, both here, Beanie Man is now a lovable pop icon, but Beanie Man came from a clash and had to war it out just like anybody else. Madonna, I remember when people used to burn effigies of her, and now she's, well, maybe not totally lovable, but almost boring. So, so it can pave a career that will make that iTunes place. But also the fact that in the future of Jamaica, there are a number of different technologies like the V-card, etc. Because the thing that limits us buying on iTunes is not knowing about iTunes, but it's not having credit cards. Our penetration of credit cards is about 19%, I think, in Jamaica. And so there have been a number of different ways that we've been stepping around that. V-cards is one that I know Virtual Mall is using, and I can think of at least two other ways. And so we're talking about a matter of 2 to 3 years before those technologies allow us to buy on iTunes. And if you look at the sites that they can buy on, then you see that it's not our lack of knowledge of iTunes. It's not our lack of use of the technology as YouTube blogs, etc., or the prominence of even music blogs in Jamaica show. But it is just the lack of ability to, at this point in time, buy from iTunes. And so, to me, it's a matter of time. So, for Enzoderos, we're putting our artists in the position so that when that time comes in 2 to 3 years, they'll be ready for that.
I take a slightly different perspective. I think Jamaicans don't like to spend on music because we value it in a particular way. Similarly, we don't like to spend to go into a football match, but we love football. So I don't know how we're going to overcome that hurdle. I think it is in the how we sell the idea that the music itself is valuable and it's intellectual property. And I can tell you, I don't do everything for free, and we have problems about that, right? So I take a slightly different perspective on that.
Right. Well, what I was saying is that, and Sonia just echoed that a while ago. We said Jamaicans, but the market for music is really not the Jamaicans in Jamaica. And so the perspective of, say, Caribbean people abroad, the diaspora, and then beyond that, those people will buy. But at this point in time, the artists that they'll buy or etc. are not there in the spaces that they could do that. I mean, no one likes to spend money, but the Jamaicans in Jamaica are probably never going to be big music buyers. We have so much of it for free. But try living in New York as a Jamaican and wanting to download the latest Cartel single. You don't have as many options as here.
But if in the initial stage it involves paying for it, because it spoke about how the landscape is changing with digital download and so on. I'm saying initially, if I'm not willing to spend that first dollar, right, then I don't think it will move from there. I want to get it free first. And in Jamaica, that's the way it works before the public. There are a few artists which get big outside and penetrate the Jamaican market and will love them. But the truth is, the real testing ground for me is Jamaica. My brother has to come to Jamaica to get a single that people will listen to before he can go back to New York or Florida and talk about him in dancehall artists. The truth is, if you cannot do that,
YouTubing, etc. that you're talking about. One time that used to be fans who would do that. Now that is strictly a management function to do all of that and put out, as I said in presentation, put out that kind of free material to move them into the knowledge of them into diasporic markets. But I do take your point. Everybody loves something for free.
I'd like to thank all the panelists. Very informative this morning. I'd like to direct a question to Dr. Barnett. How much violence did erupt around the feud, and what happened to the audience and the feud context after the photo shoot?
Yes, thank you for your question. A considerable amount of violence did actually erupt between the fans. Anytime, one group came into the same locale as the other, there would be, significant interactions. Essentially, I would say it was similar to the situation that we had last year with the Gaza Gully situation, where if a Prince Buster fan knows that you happen to be a Derek Morgan fan, and that is just enough reason to take your life, or at least to attempt to take your life. Yes, people got killed. That's why the government decided to step in. I mean, it was, it was quite a hotbed of violence. It was, it's not often talked about now, but I just wanted to emphasize that the Gaza Gully phenomena is not a new phenomena. It's a recycling of something that occurred in the past. But all too often we don't look at the past to inform the future, or to inform the present, rather. It's something that is not often talked about for whatever reason. But this, I want to, on 2 points. One is that it did not start as a marketing ploy, but genuinely, I would say, a more politically motivated feud. But the result is that the violence was so considerable because these were two giants. They were the two big men in ska. So so the fandom, the passion that the fans had for these artists. There's a worship and relationship that Sonia referred to, almost a blind worship of these fans. So in that line, I think, it is something that was stated earlier in the conference, is that reggae artists need to really be cognizant of the power they wield. And in this respect, even if they don't consider themselves as role models, but essentially conduct themselves in a manner which will not precipitate violence, especially when you're a very popular artist. The potential is always there for significant violence. But the government had to step in. They had to, because the society, they were concerned that the society would erupt into civil disorder. I mean, this is the first time that you had the government step. How many occasions do we have of a government stepping in to say, we will intervene now because this is getting serious? I mean, we hear about the Goofy and L.A. Lewis and the Beanie Man and the bounty killer, merciless bounty killer, but fortunately the government hasn't had to step in. But they stepped in with the Gaza Gully situation, and in fact some people argue that it was our friend in Tivoli Gardens, Mr. Coke, who initiated this peace between Vibes Cartel and Movado. But the fact is, an intervention was seen to be needed because of the serious, consequences.
Well, Michael's presentation and comment just now has framed what I want to ask, because Kim Marie, in searching for a business model, and you're right in searching for that model, the model seems now to be predicated on clashing. And I haven't interrogated it. I mean, you did make a bold statement about using that approach to retake the industry and the music we're losing. I didn't hear a lot said about talent. And I'm questioning the sustainability of hinging the future of the music around clashing, which you yourself, you question the sustainability of that. So I want to comment on that. And then secondly, there is something else happening now when you're talking about how the industry is being structured now in the digital age. There is also something happening digitally in terms of how people listen to music. There is a demand for much more interactivity now. You're right about we're not going to be wanting albums, but even songs, the notion of putting out a one song or two or three is being questioned because people are moving into the mash age. You want to actually get song ideas and then create your own work. So I want you to locate your notion of the business plan for the music in that context.
My seeming to not regard talent as important comes from trying to squash a long paper that I had way too much time to write into a very short presentation. it's not that I don't think talent is important. Actually, in the clash, so to speak, you need talent. You need to be. It's like doing what a DJ is doing on the tables in your head. You need to select that tune. You need to deliver it properly, etc. And it needs to be a compelling tune. You need to ride the rhythm, etc. A talentless person will find it extremely hard to win a clash, as in a dancehall clash, because it's not a war of fists, it's a war of words, and you need to have that talent. And so I just accepted that as par for the course. So I'm not saying... Even though they have talent, I sat and watched one talented one who I shall remain nameless, because some people disagree with me whether that person lost or not. But very talented artist who she couldn't clash, and so she literally died on stage to another talented artist. But what I'm saying is, while some can't survive in the space, surviving in the space does require talent, but it's just that not everybody has a clashing personality. So I do agree with that. And it is just one method. It's not the business model, but it is one method. And why I see it as one way to deal with industry forces is that, one, it's a relatively cheap method. It is one that doesn't require big four recording company money to market, etc. And so it is one way to do that. The second half of your question, can you remind me what that was?
People wanting to be more interactive now. It's not the docile person, even just downloading songs. They want to mish and mash, and that, in fact, is the future of music.
Exactly. The interactivity, one of the reasons for even forming Ends of the Earth, and it reminds me of Twitter as well, is that one of the things that Ends of the Earth does is there is a very real digital divide within our society, and most of our performers are coming from the less fortunate side of that divide, but still need to have that interactivity with their fan base, etc. And so that is part of the thing that we've had to take over. The blogging, the Twittering, and then in terms of even the downloads, you realize that artists are even communicating with each other through YouTube. You release a song, I'm releasing one in like another day to counteract that. And these are songs that can't be played on the radio because of airplay issues, etc. So this is even before it hits a sound system, a dance. This is already happening on net. So it's already happening, and because of the very real realities of the digital divide within our societies, niche markets are cropping up to deal with that interactivity and to market that and to keep up with that interactivity.
Right, just wanted to mention something that I think I hear being echoed by Cordell, if not explicitly, that Kim, we ought to be cautioned by the potential to repeat what I would call errors of the past, because many entities within dancehall, Stone Love, for example, Kilimanjaro, can speak to, and of course the clashing is now moving from the dominated scene of the sound system clash to what is more being seen as, the artists and the digital clashing, artists clashing in terms of a digital space. But there is a lot of cost to clashing. If the cost isn't even monetarily, it's also emotional. People's reputation, people's businesses can just die. So, I mean, that's just, me inserting the caution there. Annie?
Thank you. Just to jump on the clashing subject. I think a model already exists, and this is what I mentioned in my paper, that Anonymous referred to WWE, right? The World Wrestling Entertainment, Inc. This is a company in the US which is a publicly traded, privately controlled, integrated media focusing in television, internet, and live events, on clashes between these huge wrestling personalities. We should, we are very good at, Mr. Green, at setting the guidelines for what should and shouldn't be played and what hours it can be played. We need help with regulating the dancehall events so that it can become it has the potential to become similarly profitable. Africa, I mean, there are many countries in Africa with huge followings. Our DJs have huge followings. Imagine if anything like WWE were to exist. It would become a major profit earner. I suggest we need to look at existing models. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here, you know.
Thank you so much.